Hello, everyone. Since the mid portion of the season and the early jury portion of BBCAN 10 has been completed, now it's time for me to talk about the jury section before the final 6 portions of all the prior seasons. So I'm going to cover the 8 seasons. At number 8 is unsurprisingly Big Brother Canada 7. Honestly, it's just a real bore that happens in this portion of the season. Everyone's kind of boring. There's a bit of tension amongst the pretty boys, but nothing comes of it, and everyone else are completely forgettable pawns. Corey ends up winning HOH, and Anthony essentially has control of her HOH. She nominates Dane and Estefania, and I don't recall much else happening this week, outside of the fact that she's convinced to send Samantha home after Dane wins the veto. Relatively boring week, and nothing notable happens outside of Adam whining about Sam being sent home. Mark manages to win the next HOH competition and nominates Adam and Damien. I don't really remember all the details about who Mark wanted to send home, but Adam of course saves himself with the veto, and outside of that, he wins some sort of twist where he can nominate the third nominee. Adam and Anthony go back and forth regarding who should be the replacement nominee, and it's Estefania who ends up being the replacement. None of that essentially matters, since Adam uses the twist to nominate Corey and she is easily sent home. Adam becomes the next HOH, and there are only Dane's side pieces left in the game, essentially. So he nominates Damien and Estefania. If I remember correctly, though I honestly don't care, Damien was the target at this point, but he saved himself with the veto. Mark is put up as the pawn to send Estefania home easily. At number 7 is Big Brother Canada 2. This season is interesting because it's almost always ranked as the top BBCAN season, but looking at the events of the season, honestly, it was just a steamroll from one position/side to the other. And at least in the beginning, there was some interesting stuff happening, but by the early jury portion, it was just a complete steamroll, and it wasn't very interesting in my opinion. John becomes the new HOH and predictably nominates Rochelle and Sabrina on the block, as they are the two remaining outsiders, essentially. But Neda has another plan up her sleeves, and she starts to plant the seeds for John to backdoor Arlie, who is closer to John than Neda, and is the sneakiest person in the house. This ends up happening, and Allison using her special veto to take Sabrina off the block as well, causing Arlie and Adele to be on the block. Arlie is actually close to getting the votes, and it causes for John and Neda to babysit Sabrina and Rachel all week to undo the damage, and it works on their end. Neda becomes HOH, and it's an instant eviction, where she has to immediately make her nominations and has to be isolated from the others. She wanted to find a way to get Allison out of the house, so she claimed that she overheard/oversaw Allison in some sort of lie, and there's no way that Allison could rebut it, though technically, Allison was telling the truth. Allison and Sabrina are nominated, and Allison is sent home. I also feel like BBCAN 2 suffered in the mid portion of the season because the jury is so short and it doesn't take long for the end game, which is the final 6, to start after the jury started at the final 8. At 6 is BBCAN 1. It is this low because it is essentially a steamroll, but unlike another season, sorry, I don't know what came over me. Unlike that other season that I might not have mentioned, the casting is great, which more than makes up for it. There was the horrible instant eviction, where Topaz, the HOH, not only had to make her nominations instantly, but had the others hear her thoughts about it. She nominated AJ and Andrew with the intention of voting Andrew out, but most of the house, even Alec and Peter, who was supposed to be her allies, voted AJ out. Andrew wins HOH, and of course he's going to nominate Topaz after what just happened with her trying to send him home, and her closest ally in Gary, who also voted to evict him too. Gary did have his infamous slop meltdown, which was cool, and I do remember him arguing with Tala during this week, which did get uncomfortable at times. I think it was around here where the East Coast Alliance might have been made, but either way, they are definitely the main alliance by this point of time in the season. Jillian ends up winning HOH and does what she tends to do, which is make promises to people that she breaks almost immediately. And she does this with Topaz, who is second in the competition and promises to not nominate her or Alec. Alec and Peter are nominated, where they think that they are still aligned to Emmett, as the guys' alliance that they had in the beginning they thought exists, but Emmett doesn't think so anymore. Because of this, Alec throws the veto, which Peter ends up winning. Topaz is nominated, just sticking the knife even further in her back, which is what Jillian did, as she broke both elements of her promise, and the Shield is shocked when Alec is voted out. At number 5 is Big Brother Canada 3, and this season honestly benefits because it has a longer jury portion, which means there's more time between the start of jury to the end game. Though I'm still kind of mixed on it overall, hence its placement. The jury portion starts at the final 12 for some reason, and we have Zach win HOH. He is planning on backdooring Bruno, so he nominates Godfrey and his best ally, Jordan, on the block, so he could pretend like the house thinks that they aren't close. Cindy ends up coming back to the game, which scares Zach, so he keeps the nominations the same. Godfrey going home is the expected move, but Cindy and Brittany are able to get Sarah, Bruno, and Bobby on the same page to blindside Jordan and half of the house. Pilar wins the next HOH, and of course, it was going to be an utter bore. She nominates Godfrey and Cindy. Godfrey wins the veto to save himself, and Brittany is, of course, the replacement nominee to send Cindy back out. Nothing notable at all. Kevin ends up winning HOH, and the Diaper Alliance, which is an alliance between the two showmances, started dominating around here, if I remember correctly. He rambles on and on about some huge grand plan, when all he wanted to do was send Bobby home. Bobby and Brittany are nominated, Kevin wins the veto to not use it, and Bobby goes home. But it is a triple eviction, which was a new thing at the time. Luckily, Brittany won the HOH, so someone from the Diaper Alliance is guaranteed to go home. She nominated Zach, Pilar, and Kevin, so it looks like a solid thing. Bruno ends up winning the veto, and you think he would just leave it the same. But he vetoes Zach off the block. Bruno and Sarah go at it in the pantry, and it was great to watch. Instead of nominating Ashley, the final member of the Diaper Alliance, she nominates Willow because she's envious that Sarah has another ally. Due to it being a vote to save, Sarah ended up overthinking it, with it ultimately becoming a combination causing Kevin and Willow to go home instead. Ashley manages to win HOH and is obviously going for Sarah and Brittany, so she nominates Sarah, who is her target, against Godfrey. Sarah, who sucked at competitions at this point, shockingly wins the veto, and Brittany is the replacement nominee, where she is going to go home. But Canada voted for people to be have-nots, so they can find the coup d'etat, which Brittany does. With this in mind, she saves herself and Godfrey from elimination, nominates Zach and Bruno goes home. For a somewhat interesting middle portion of the game, it kind of teetered out towards the end with this stupid coup d'etat twist. At number 4 is Big Brother Canada 6. For a cast that I wasn't initially looking forward to, they definitely delivered in the mid portion of the season. This portion started off great, and while it was good, it did kind of end in a whimper. Derek wins HOH despite the entire house being against me, who is the biggest pusher for wanting Derek out of the house, so Johnny and Ryan are nominated. Derek wins the veto and doesn't use it, which is not surprising. Johnny managed to make Kayla and Derek comfortable with keeping him after he convinced most of the house to boot Ryan instead, Though the edit made it seem like Ali saved him, I don't know why they made that choice. Anyways. Johnny manages to become the next HOH, and he made his mission known. Send Derek home. The obvious move of nominating Kayla and Derek is made, and like the season beforehand in the final 8, with a showman saving themselves, Derek wins the veto and Ali is nominated against Kayla as a pawn. The Paris, Maddie, Will trifecta, Don't Trust Me, Ali, Olivia trifecta pushing for Kayla to go. It calls for a lot of great arguments between the house during like a good 24 hours with everyone, and it was amazing to watch. No one knew how the vote was going to go, and even while the voting was taking place, the trio is not sure who to vote out, but Ali ultimately leaves very pissed off. The triple eviction in itself isn't interesting and was very boring, since it was the lead up that made the week so good. Derek wins HOH again and nominates Johnny, Olivia, and Maddie. Kayla wins the veto and doesn't use it, and Maddie is saved, sending Olivia and Johnny home. At number 3 is Big Brother Canada 4. It isn't higher because I really don't like the twist that started out this portion of the season, but there's so much craziness that ends up happening during this period, and I think it's the peak of the season overall. Kelsey is brought back for some reason, and she uses the information she saw on the live feeds to tell people that Mitch is playing everyone in the house. Raul ends up winning HOH, and she convinces him to target Mitch, though there is some infighting with the trio, which was actually kind of interesting in my opinion, and to nominate Joel as a pawn. Mitch did take on the annoying trio all week, and I loved seeing him make the house mad, and it made for some good drama, though the twist really, really sucked. Canada did a twist where you would vote 2 people to have a chance to win HOH, and this caused the Paquette brothers to win HOH. There's a huge back and forth that happens, and it causes for damn near everyone to turn on Maddie. The Paquettes nominate Ramsey and Maddie, and the former quits before the veto due to a family emergency. Since production didn't want to do a new HOH, they went on and Tim is nominated, where Maddie is evicted. BBCAN had a twist where they had the relatives of the house guests come into the house, where they competed for the HOH competition, and that's how Cassandra became HOH. She decided that she had enough of supporting Jared and Kelsey all season, but because she knew Jared from before the game, she knew that cutting him was not going to go over well. But she actually intended on targeting the Paquettes here, so she nominated them with Nikki, rest in peace to her. But the brothers won the veto because it was a how bad do you want it veto, and Jared would have won it if he cut his hair. Because of that, Cassandra put his ass on the block, where Jared and Kelsey picked fights with her all week before he was sent out the door. So I'm adding this part after I initially recorded this part because I forgot about a week. So in week 7, Maddie wins HOH, and she finally decides to do what she should have done on her first HOH with targeting Jared and Kelsey and putting them both on the block and targeting the trio completely. There's definitely some arguing between both sides. I remember there's even some tension between Jared and Kelsey in this week, if I remember correctly. Jared ends up winning the veto, partially because Raul helps Jared winning the veto, meaning that he would be the obvious replacement. Though, Raul should have let them help him win the veto so he could have taken one of them off and someone not in their alliance be put up. I said of that little mess that happens. This week wasn't that great, hence me forgetting about it initially, and Raul is sent home. At number 2 is Big Brother Canada 5. Everything just goes up and up and up and up from here on out. This portion of the season starts out great and ends great, which rarely happens with these types of things. The jury phase is started with a double eviction, and Netta's immunity is done. Cindy ends up winning HOH and nominates Dylan and Jackie. One of them being the first juror was kind of whatever, but when Jackie saved herself, Cindy was convinced by Ika to backdoor Netta, and we see both women go at it in the storage room and even in the eviction area. It was great to watch, and I was shocked that this happened, though I hated that the cast could hear the live audience. Dylan ends up winning HOH and nominates Dimitri and Jackie. Despite hating one another for the entire season up to this point, Dylan and Dimitri make up, and the latter wins veto. Cindy is the only real option for Dylan to put up, and it was so crazy to see how quickly the Mecca were to discard her, especially after she chose to side with them against Netta the week prior. Dimitri gets another HOH under his belt, and he knows that Bruno and Kevin are out to get him, so he puts their asses on the block. Honestly, this week is pretty boring, even with the stupid secret veto twist that William won, which really didn't make a difference anyways, since he won the real veto, so Kevin was coming off the block anyways. Karen was nominated to seal Bruno's fate out of the house. After the relatively relaxed vibe of the last 2 weeks, things start to pick up again with Kevin winning HOH and putting Ika and Dimitri on the block, since he knew they determined how the last few weeks went down and he was a loner essentially. It seemed like their fates were completely sealed, but Dimitri won veto and Kevin nominated Jackie as an attempt to come to some sort of understanding with them. Jackie fought with Ika the entire week, and no one in the house really liked Jackie anyways, though there was an attempt by Dre to get the house to send Ika home, but Dylan and Karen completely exposed her. It is triple eviction time, and with hashtag Dre exposed happening right before eviction, Dimitri, Ika, Dylan, and Karen are completely against the French Connection, so when Dimitri won HOH again, the French Connection and Kevin are nominated. Drake goes off on Dylan, and it was nice to see her unleash on him with the flip flop stuff while twerking at the same time. Like, who fights and twerks at the same time? Kevin wins the veto, and the French Connection go against Dylan, meaning they're sent to jury. At number 1 is Big Brother Canada 9. I think this portion of the season really benefited by the fact that it was only 2 weeks long, so it was kind of jam-packed, and everything was set up so well in the beginning and continues to be set up well in the end, so it's just non-stop entertainment. Beth manages to get to the HOH, and she's determined to send Victoria home, since she sees that Victoria wants to be the middle woman in her alliance and has been throwing Beth under the bus. Rohan and Tara are nominated, and for the 3rd time in a row, Rohan wins the veto. Victoria is put up, and she does not handle it well at all, making good TV for us. The fight between she and Tara was great to watch, but it did not spare her safety at all. It was a double eviction night, and Kiefer became HOH. He nominated 2 of the other alliance in Brayden and Rohan, and the latter's luck with the veto ended as Tyshawn won the veto to keep things the same. Rohan easily and quickly goes home. It was kind of a dud, but that's the usual for doubles, and this portion of the season only lasted 2 weeks. Jedson wins HOH and wants to send the easy target in Tara home, so he nominates her against her ally Tina. Everyone thought this would be an easy week, especially since Tara sucked at competitions up to this point, but she pulls out a clutch veto win, but it puts Jedson in an awkward position. Him and his alliance decide to send Kiefer home, and all 4 of them are crying their eyes about the mess. Actually, no, I don't think Beth was, now that I recall it. And what makes it even better for us is that they renege on it entirely, despite already burning the bridge. So Tina ends up going home in a weird dilemma that someone in her position normally wouldn't go home under, but it was so interesting to watch. So that is my list on how I rank the mid portion of the season, which is the early to mid Joey portion. And it will be interesting to see how the end game portions hold up, and I should be doing that in a few weeks. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with another Big Brother video soon.